Why even talk about the 1840s? The 2020s are hard enough, right? But I think it is instructive that at this time there were people taking action in the context of polarizing opinion that can speak to us. And I think that's the advantage of learning history in any format, whether in a school setting or in a conversation as we're having tonight, and as hopefully the community has from time to time in living rooms and dining rooms and churches and other places. So I'm going to be brief tonight, and the reason I look at the 1840s, and there's quite a lot of background, and there's some nice maps and so forth, so if you have a chance, take a look, and you'll see the context more graphically portrayed, is that it was a time when the generation that had given birth to the Declaration was dying off. And those of us who have parents or grandparents that may have been in World War II are seeing the same thing now. Huge sweeps of history and huge impersonal forces at work, but individuals, some of it leading to heroism, some of it just leading to survival, were making a difference. And in the 1840s, we had the first experience of, I guess, coming to grips with the limitations of the principles of the Declaration. Not that they were not well put, but life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness always beg the question, for whom? And in this period, after a series of congressional compromises and a Wild West that people could escape to when things got too tough, we met ourselves in Texas. And those of you who've seen a lot about Texas probably in the movies, the Alamo, and so forth, we have some recollection, or not recollection, but at least recognition of the fact that there was a war or something like a war between the United States and Mexico. And what was that all about? Well, it gets back to first causes. So who is going to benefit from the Declaration and its principles? Is it everyone who is a citizen? And how about those that are not citizens? And in particular, how about people who were enslaved? It's interesting to note that in the 1830s, 33, 34, 35, Texas was just being settled by Americans who at that time were flooding in from nearby territory, and it was all territory just to the east. And they were called Texians or Texicans. They were from some other place. They emigrated to Texas, where there was a lot of land and not a lot of population. The concerning thing for a lot of Americans back east was many of those folks were bringing their slaves with them. In fact, 1 out of every 8 people for the first 5 or 6 years of the 1830s who landed in Texas was a slave. Well, the presence of these folks and the fact that Mexico had outlawed slavery, but it's a very sparse population, and the ease with which people could lay down a claim to property in Texas did lead them, these new immigrants and these new settlers, into conflict with the Mexican government. And after about a year of a lot of stern letters back and forth, people took things into their own hands, and conflicts arose. After about 6 months of skirmishes, there was a fledgling army, and it was annihilated at the Battle of the Alamo. There were about 100 Americans who died there. Within 1 month, a fellow by the name of Sam Houston, you've heard of the name. By the way, he died after the Civil War had started, and he was a staunch Unionist for all of his life. But he was also a person who was very enterprising at the time. He not only organized the army to go to settle accounts with the Mexican army, which was much bigger, but he also was working with people in the territory to create the kingdom, basically, of Texas. Became a republic. Not a state, not an American territory, a republic. They were bold people at the time. And that, for a while, settled things in our Southwest, but not for a very long time. Exactly 10 years later, there was a war with Mexico. And that Mexico was a lot more, that war was a lot more purposeful. There was an administration in Washington that wanted, in the worst way, to settle the area with the possibility of having slavery extended all the way from east of the Mississippi, all the way to California and up to Oregon. And then there were also people in the North who were thinking that's not where we want to go. Not because necessarily, and frankly, the majority of people in the North were thinking in their anti-slavery way, not because they felt that persons of color should have all the same civil rights and political rights, but because they were very concerned that slavery in the territories would prevent them or their descendants from ever settling and having that opportunity to move west and do something for themselves and their families. And so the fight was on. War was actually declared against Mexico. Interestingly, as we look ahead, and in the next month and a half, we're going to get to the Civil War. And at the time, there were some people who thought we might get to Civil War, but not everybody thought that. But certainly, a fuse had been lit in the Mexican War. And interestingly, as I pointed out in my background, the military leaders in the Civil War on both sides cut their teeth as lieutenants or as soldiers in the Mexican War. As a matter of fact, a Lieutenant Grant and a Captain Lee fought within about a mile and a half of each other and never met, on the same side at that time, with the American forces against the Mexican forces. And out of all of this came a settlement. It's interesting, I'm going to make 2 points and I'm going to sit down and talk about city business. One thing is that in this time, the 1840s, late 1840s at this point, we see the second generation of Americans, one in particular by the name of John Quincy Adams, who was the son of John Adams, who was one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, also getting near the end of their lives. It was only a few weeks after the war was over, and America, by the way, had paid at the price of 5 cents an acre for about 338 million acres that belonged to the Republic of Mexico, which is about a third to a half of the size of Mexico before the war. But with that grand settlement and other things, Mr. Adams had been very busy. And one day, 3 weeks after the war was over officially, he collapsed at his desk in the House of Representatives. He had been in 1777, along with his father as a 7-year-old. We talked about this last time. On an American ship frigate going to Europe to try to gain European support other than British for the American cause. He was a diplomat as a late teen, early 20-something between America and the courts in Russia, also in Germany and also in Holland. He became a senator. He also became president of the United States, and after serving as the president, he decided that his service had not been fulfilled to the country, and so from 1831 until 1848, he served in the House of Representatives and died at his desk. He was carried away, but he was dead at his desk. It's my goal in life. Finally, and I have to set the stage. It's also it was a stage that was set for him, and with perfect hindsight, we can say, oh, that was a formative part of his life. But a first-time congressman from Illinois by the name of Lincoln arrived in Washington in December 1847 with his wife and 2 sons. He threw himself into his work. He was not an educated man. What he read, as he said later on in life, stuck with him. While he was serving for that year, and he never left Washington, he had 456 roll calls. He only missed 13 of them. He had a bad cold probably at one point and missed some. Nevertheless, his constituents did not support him for re-election. And why was that? Well, he was one of several Whigs who repeatedly, and that was the name of the party at the time, criticized the administration for the war with Mexico. And although the Congress had declared the war, he was concerned that the ever-increasing activity of the American forces was beyond what the Congress had prescribed for the campaign. And in the end, he was not selected because some thought he might be disloyal. From that time until 1854, he goes underground. To us and to history in a lot of respects. He had a pretty good law career and was active in that, but was also formulating where is the middle ground that saves the Union.